Hello, welcome everyone to this channel. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James's Bible. Today I am in the book of Esther and I will be covering chapters 4 right through to chapter 8 today. So 4 chapters to review, and if you are ready, I'm ready, so let us get started. Now, if you watched my video yesterday, you will know what happened in chapter 1, 2 and 3 of Esther, and they were very eventful. We've had a lot happen in such a short period of time, and I'm sure in the real state of time it was a lot longer. But we have a new queen now under the king of Persia, King Hazaru. He has a new queen who is Esther. He also has an official who has been promoted, and he has caused a decree that basically is to execute all Jews. Now, if you want to know the details of this, check out my video yesterday for chapters 1 to 3 in Esther. All the details are there. So we start chapter 4 with all of the Jews mourning. They have just learned now that they are to be executed on the 13th day of the 12th month. Now that Haman, who is kind of like the prime minister, has given this decree that all will be killed on this date. He wants them all executed. So there is great mourning going on. And Queen Esther's father, foster father, who is actually her cousin, because her parents had died, he rips off his clothes and he puts ashes on his head and he stands outside of the king's gate. It's kind of that, like, making himself humble to the Lord, and also making the king see, or hopefully somebody will see, to send messages back to him that, you know, of the despair, the mourning that is going on for what has been put out there. Now it's Queen Esther's maids that tell her this awful news, that all of the Jews are to be executed. And she cries deeply, and she sends garments out to her cousin Mordecai, her foster father, because she's heard that he's ripped his clothes off and he's got these ashes, and he refuses. No, he's doing it because he's humbling himself before God. So Esther then sends one of the king's eunuchs out to Mordecai to find out exactly what's happened. How did this all come about? And Mordecai explains exactly what's happened, and that Haman has actually said to the king that he will give all of this silver to the king's treasury, so that he will then kill all of these Jews for the execution of them all. And he gives this eunuch a copy of the king's decree, so it's all written down there, and he takes that back to Esther so she can see exactly what this plan has within it. Now Mordecai asks her to plead to the king to stop this atrocity. But she then sends a message explaining, I can't go into the king's quarters, it is forbidden. You know, she'll be off with her head kind of thing. The king has to put out his royal scepter and then the person is allowed to enter into the king's presence. However, she's not seen him for 30 days. He's not called for her in that length of time. So she explains this to her cousin. And Mordecai says, look, don't think you're safe because you're in those quarters of the king's palace. You know, it's all Jews who are to be killed. So that includes you and anybody else who's a Jew within the palace too. And he says, if you remain silent, you will perish. He tells her to have faith in God because he's put her there for a reason. So she's got to take action. She's there, put by God, to basically save all of these Jews from this annihilation. So Queen Esther agrees. She needs to do something, so she sends a message back to Mordecai saying that get everybody, all of the Jews, to fast for 3 days. So this is to humble ourselves before God. So she wants them all to fast for 3 days. And she says, I and my maids will all do the same for 3 days. No food, no drink, fast for 3 days. And then she says, once that's over, she will go to the king, regardless of whether she's called or not, and if she perishes, she will perish. So she's putting her life on the line after this fasting period, and Mordecai hears this news and he agrees. He will fast and make sure that all the Jews around will fast too. And this is where we close chapter 4. So as we open chapter 5, it's 3 days that have now passed for the fast, and Esther puts on her royal robes and then she walks around, stands near the king's inner court area so that he will see her. And he does. He notices her and he puts out his royal scepter and she is called forth towards him. The king is there sitting on his throne and he says to Esther, what is it you wish? And she says, if it pleases the king, let you and Haman, your side official, come to a banquet that I have prepared. So the king agrees, okay, we will come to your banquet. And at the banquet, the king says to Esther, what is it you petition? Whatever you request, it will be granted to you. If you wanted half of the kingdom, I would give it to you. And Esther says, let me put on another banquet and let me answer your request there. Then Haman, he's a bit sort of merry with all this wine at the banquet that he's had. He leaves the king's palace and he goes out towards the king's gates and he sees Mordechiah there. And again, Mordechiah does not bow in front of him. And he gets angry, but he contains his anger and then he goes home. And he tells his wife and he tells his friends all about this. Look, I have been promoted by the king. I'm in this position where all bow to me, and yet Mordechiah, he will not bow. He says, I've even been invited by the queen and the king only to go to this one banquet, and yet he will not bow before me. So his wife and his friends suggest to him, look, you need to get this guy gone. Get Mordechiah killed. Get the gallows, have him killed before the banquet, the second banquet, and then you can go in there and enjoy it because he will be gone. And if you're wondering what gallows are, I'll just give you a quick picture so you can see. That is how they want to basically get rid of Mordechiah, by hanging him from one of those. A pretty painful death. So that is their plot, they're saying. And this closes chapter 5. So in chapter 6, we open up with the king having a sleepless night. He cannot get to sleep. And so he calls one of his servants, come forth, bring the book of Chronicles and read to me. And so his servant comes along and he reads from the book of Chronicles and he goes to this part in the Chronicles which talks about Mordechiah when he basically alerted the king that two of his servants wanted to kill him. And he told Esther, she told him, they found out it was true, and basically he saved the king's life. And so the king, on hearing this, says, what has happened to this Mordechiah? What dignity, what honour has been bestowed upon him? And the servants say, nothing has been bestowed upon him. And so the next morning, Haman is up and he's got this plan in his head. He's going to get these gallows. He wants Mordechiah killed. So he's on his way to the king to have this be a suggestion. You know, this is what we need to do. And he's going to have like whatever story he wants to say to make this actually happen. So he enters the king's palace, you know, ready to tell him this plan, when the king is in a different state of mind. And he says to him before Haman can even open his mouth with what he wants to do. So the king invites Haman in and he says to him, what shall be done to a man who delights and honours the king? And Haman wonders, who might this be he's talking about? So he doesn't think, obviously, that's going to be Mordechiah. And he says, well, I suggest he gets placed in royal robes and put on horseback and paraded through the city square to proclaim the wonder that he had done for his king. This is what should be done to the man who delights the king. And so the king thinks, wow, this is a great idea. I want you, Haman, to go on out there, put the robes on Mordechiah and put him on horseback and parade him through the city square. When Haman, can you just imagine Haman's face when he realises it's Mordechiah, he has to do this? And he's like, he's got to do it. This is the king's command, so off he goes. That's what he has to do. So Haman dresses him in the royal gowns, put him on horseback, and he parades him through the city square. And after all this has happened to Mordechiah, he still returns to the king's gate because he is on a mission, you know, for the Jews, not just for himself, but for all of the Jews. So he goes back to where he began. But Haman, he goes home in humiliation with his head down, and he goes and he tells his wife and his friends exactly what had happened. And when his friends and his wife hear about this, they realise, you know, God is on Mordechiah's side, and they say to him, you are not going to prevail against Mordechiah. Then Haman is summoned by the king's servants to come to the second banquet that Esther has now put on. And this is where we close chapter 6. So we open chapter 7. This is the second banquet set by Queen Esther, and we have Haman and we have the king who attend. And this is where the king asks Queen Esther again, what is it you request? You know, I will give you half of the kingdom if you ask for it. What is it you would like? And her request was for her and her Jewish community, the people, all of the Jews, to be saved from this annihilation. She said the Jews have been sold into slavery and now they are to be executed. And the king not sure about this because he'd passed over the reins, not really thinking about it, to Haman to do all of this. And he gets angry and he says, "Who has done such a thing?" And she quickly tells him, "It was your official here, Haman." Well, this just angers the king, so much so that he storms out of the room, like he can't believe that his own official has done this, such a thing. So he walks out. Then Haman knows, oh my goodness, I am in pretty deep waters here now. He's going to kill me. So he goes to Queen Esther and he's like, "Mercy, mercy, please have mercy on me. Please, I beg you, don't let the king kill me. Please, please." And he's like bending down at her knees and begging. And the king then comes back in and sees him here before his queen doing this. And this just makes him even more enraged. And so the king orders his servants to cover his head with this hood. And that is to represent that he, Haman, will be now executed. Now, one of the king's eunuchs highlights that outside of Haman's house there is this gallows that's been built. Now, this is what Haman himself had built for Mordecai to be killed upon. And so the king decides, right, well, we'll use those gallows to kill Haman. So the king's servants take Haman out to the gallows and he is executed. And it says this is when the king's anger started to subside. And this is where we close chapter 7. So in chapter 8 we see that Haman's home is now given to Queen Esther and Mordecai is promoted. How did this happen? Well, Queen Esther had told the king that she was related to Mordecai, that he was her cousin, and the king has then given her the estate of Haman and she's passed that over to Mordecai to look after, and he has also been given the king's signet ring to proclaim this role as official. Queen Esther then goes to the king and cries about this decree that has been made on the Jewish people, that there is this decree in writing that says on the 13th day of the 12th month that they will all be executed. So the king decides to make a counter decree. And he gets his servants to write letters in all different languages and send it out to all of the provinces around the kingdom. That is to say that the Jews are now to defend themselves and to fight against their enemies. Anybody who comes against them, they are to kill. And again, he seals this with his signet ring. We then see Mordecai put on royal attire. He then leaves the king's quarters, rides out in front of the people to show he is now in this position and Haman is no more. And so the people rejoice. They are so happy. The Jews have such joy that day, it says. And then once the letter arrives to all of those provinces, the Jews are overjoyed and happy and celebrate and make it a holiday, like a feast. And it says at the end here, many of the peoples turned over and became Jews themselves because they were fearing the fear of being killed by the Jews, becoming one of their enemies. So they changed who they were to fit this role. So we end this last chapter on a high. The Jews are in joy. It's like there's been a turnaround of events. No more mass killings because the king has given this counter decree. And so all is well as we end chapter 8. So thank you for your time, for going through these 5 chapters with me. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will be back again tomorrow with more within the book of Esther. We've got 2 more chapters and then this book is closed. Hope to see you then. Take care now. Bye.